welcome to another episode of Light of the World. I'm here in Toronto with Archpriest Viatcheslav Davidenko.
O Heavenly King, comfort, the Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fillest all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and dwell in us and cleanse us of all impurity and save our souls, O good one.
We are here right now in an upstairs classroom at the Toronto Cathedral of the Holy Trinity, Russian Orthodox Cathedral. And I want you to forgive us for the background music if you hear it. We have a choir practicing just a door or two down. Our topic today is called Ode to Gen Z. We're talking about the most recent generation of people that are currently growing up and that I am a part of, and unfortunately are also the most faithless. So I have some stats here. I have some data. According to surveycenter.org, I think americansurveycenter.org, more than a third of Gen Z identifies as religiously unaffiliated. 36% say, I do not believe in God. I wanted to ask this question for many years. Why are people not coming to church, specifically the youth? There is a distinct lack of young faces in Orthodox churches all across America. However, I noticed that in this cathedral here in Toronto and in a few other distinct churches, that's not the case. There is a very distinct youth presence, which is why I wanted to interview Atheist Viatcheslav, Father Viatcheslav here, who runs a youth circle and retains many of the youth, especially in this generation. Can I have your thoughts on why are these people not coming to church, in your opinion?
Well, I think probably the greatest challenge for these people is the fact that they are raised with the ideology of me. Everything centers around me.
Because I own my body. My body is not a political playground. It's not a place for legislation. It's mine and it's my future. And
what do I get out of something? What do I get out of church? What do I get out of, coming? And even here in Toronto, when we do see a good bit of young people attending, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that some of them come for the social aspect because they know others are attending, and so they're coming because they want to fellowship. They're not necessarily, all of them, not all, are consciously thinking, I'm coming for God. Because nowadays, I think the ideas of duty, of responsibility, of accountability, are fading into the background against the backdrop of, how does this benefit me? What do I get out of it? What can I have for this?
Well, I guess that's the big question is, even if you say, well, this is because it's the right thing to do, to show up, to pray, the ultimate question that I've heard a lot of youth ask is either, where are my friends going to be? Will I meet any here? Because I don't see any. So it's sort of this like bystander effect where they're all like, well, I'm not coming to church because he's not coming, but that person's not coming because you're not coming, right? But the real question that I've heard is, well, what's in it for me? What do I get out of it? So everything has this transactional approach. What do I get out of it? For example, you tell someone pray. Well, I came across this atheist Instagram page because I was doing some research. And let me read the quote to you. It says, prayers are to Christians what dolls are to children.
Well, that obviously is spoken by someone who doesn't know what prayers are and perhaps didn't play with dolls very well growing up as a child as well. I would say that one of the things we discussed specifically with the youth, with this very generation that attends church services and does come for our youth group meetings, we discussed the fact that it is quite evident that psychotherapy, and psychology and psychiatry is on a great rise right now because people are hurting inside. And I think a lot of pain for people is not the physical pain because, our medical sciences are pretty good if you have a broken arm or a twisted leg or whatever. You could be fixed up fairly quickly and even be given pills. However, when your soul hurts, when your mind hurts, when you are tormented by your memories, by your anxious thoughts of what the future holds and so on, a lot of people are not aware where to get help. And so that's why, as I said, I think, psychotherapy is greatly on the rise. Even within our own parish, we have several Orthodox psychotherapists who attend and confess and commune on a regular basis, who are conscientious Christians. But we see this happening because people are not able to understand what prayer does to their hearts and minds, and the fact that prayer can actually heal your heart and mind. I just heard a piano outside, where they're having the choir practice, and I think you're a musical person, so you would probably agree. I think in many ways, prayer to the soul is what the tuning is to the piano. The person who prays on a regular basis is like a person who holds his instrument in a proper tuning, so that if you invite a fairly skilled musician, that individual can play something very, very, very nice. But if your piano is hopelessly out of tune, even if you bring Mozart or Beethoven or Bach and put it in front of that piano, well, maybe aside from satire, I don't think they'd be able to do anything. So in that sense, I think, because the young people are not yet aware of the fact that prayer can actually heal their souls. Once they get that experience, once they get that knowledge, they become more and more frequent visitors to church.
36% of Gen Z are Christians, while 48% identify as nuns. Not N-U-N-S, N-O-N-E-S.
Like nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And this is the first generation in history where the nuns clearly outnumber the Christians. First time. I was under the impression that the millennials were that generation and that things were heading in a positive direction with Gen Z. That's not the case.
Well, I think that the Western society most likely is facing right now the profound crisis of faith and of identity in many ways, really, that some of us were very well acquainted with in the Soviet Union. I'm sure you're aware, I grew up in the atheist Soviet Union, where the numbers of believers actually were fairly small, at least official ones. And for example, when I went to school, I don't think anyone in my classmates actually said that they believed in God. If they did, they hid it well because they were afraid. And the kind of society that became sort of the end result of that ideology was actually very frightful. Not many people are aware, but the Soviet Union, when it collapsed, left behind a decade of what the Russians call the evil 90s. And that's when people were perpetrating horrific financial and just regular crimes, killing each other, stealing and doing terrible things to each other, because they had no fear of God. So if there was no police on the street, they had no one to stop them. And I think that a lot of people who are the nuns that you're saying, that have no faith, they will find themselves without any inner guidance. They have no GPS, so to speak. They're not aware of which way is up. Once they will start doing things that are going to be contrary to their conscience, they're going to be hurting because they're not going to be even aware of how to reconcile with themselves and with others once things are done that are not, sort of very moral, or
well, a big
spiritual.
issue here is that they don't like the fact that a seemingly outdated system, because to them, church and God, it's all just part of a system, opium for the masses. They see themselves as sort of, I guess, enlightened, but at the same time suffering and lost, but unwilling to accept potential, help from a higher being.
Let me offer you a perspective. Imagine someone coming into a sports school, like a karate school or judo school, or even athletics, club. There is a hard and very strict discipline. And in order for someone to achieve something, get a black belt or maybe set a record, in the athletic club, one has to sacrifice, one has to limit oneself. One can't, spend half the night out partying, drink, do drugs, and then have some sort of sport accomplishments. So I think sometimes the young people are sold this idea by the hapless would-be ideological guides away from God, who say, well, religion, it cramps your style, religion takes away your freedom. But discipline is the path to true freedom. And I think that those naive individuals who think, that having to pray, having to attend divine services is going to limit their freedom, they find themselves in a vacuum. They're finding themselves doing what it is they want, but not really ultimately getting any satisfaction because there's no structure to their lives.
I was under the impression that that's how they were sort of functioning, and then when you would prod them, kind of poke them and ask them, well, do you believe in any kind of, higher power? I mean, it seems that Gen Z is the most spiritual generation in terms of, this terminology like manifestation, I'm manifesting this, or the universe is taking care of me. And we talked about this on an astrology episode, but it's still quite relevant. They refuse to acknowledge God, though, because perhaps their perception of Christianity is tainted by maybe the Dark Ages. I mean, there's a quote here from Luther Burbank, another famous atheist, who said that the idea that a good God would send people to a burning hell is utterly damnable to me. I don't want to have anything to do with such a God. And so that's what people think. They think, oh, God is this angry man that just sends people, like into the hellfire. I made you, yes, I love you, and go to hell. Does he send people to hell, or what actually happens?
Well, you see, it betrays a woeful ignorance of Christianity on the part of people making such statements. And perhaps also what is not helpful is some of the Protestant Reformation preachers of the, like the end of the 18th, the beginning of the 19th century, who preached the angry God, who's going to send you to hell, because that was seemingly, probably in their mind, the only way to try to get the society to slow down from just degrading in total immorality. However, from the Orthodox perspective, no one is sent to hell by God. Everyone chooses to go to hell on his own. And some of the Holy Fathers actually say that the burning fires of hell are the fires of divine love, which, while comforting the saints, are providing a tremendous suffering and pain, to the sinners, because the sinners have rejected God's love. And it is their realization that they made the wrong choice, that they turned away from God, that they despised him, that they spited him. That is what causes that fire to be burning for them. It's the fire of regret. They've made the wrong choice. Maybe some of them were misguided, misled, but in the end, really, every person has to make that choice, whether you embrace God or not. God is love. He does not delight in human suffering. That is something that we do to ourselves. And consequently, go ahead.
Sorry, I like what you just said. God is love. He does not delight in human suffering. That is something I've heard amongst Soviet people and non-Soviet. They say, if God, is so loving, so caring, doesn't want people to suffer, why does he allow it to happen? Stephen Fry, another atheist, said, you can't just say there's a God because the world is beautiful, because love exists. You have to account for bone cancer in children. That's his resting case as to why God cannot exist.
Well, once again, it's a very narrow view and an overly simplified view. I grappled with the idea myself. Why is it that some things in our lives are very linear? Your physical damage to your body is linear. If you stab yourself with a knife, you're going to feel pain, number one, and then also you're going to bleed and possibly die. If you put your hand in the fire, you're going to feel burning right away. And you kind of say to yourself, well, why isn't that sinning doesn't hurt the same way? And it's because if sinning hurt exactly in the same sort of a linear fashion, then we would be devoid of free will. Allowing us a choice to sin or not to sin and postponing or maybe delaying the consequences at least a little bit, God has given us a choice. Cancer, various other illnesses, we've brought them upon ourselves. We have distorted human nature to the extent that we have abused food, we've abused the planet that we live on, and so on and so forth. And we've created, mutated all of these things. God didn't create cancer. Cancer came about as a result of us abusing our own nature. I don't think a person who is, overdosing on drugs can blame God for, creating drugs. God didn't purposefully create the drugs. He created this world, and the very drugs that are an overdose for someone and a tremendous evil can save so many lives when they're used properly, by medical staff in the hospital, whether it be pain management or some other treatment. You could say snake venom, it kills, but then also doctors are able to use it so many times, not only as anti-venom for people who are bitten by a snake, but also as a medicine that actually provides tremendous cures for various other illnesses. So,
well, I knew a young man who's a few years younger than me, and he left the church, and he told me that, he understands that, certain things in excess can cause extreme, bodily harm, spiritual harm, and whatnot. But what his problem was is that the people that don't deserve to suffer. We have, millions of people like that across the globe. Always been that way through history. And his question was, okay, if they didn't do anything to deserve it, and your excuse as to why God is allowing it to happen, because evil doesn't come from God. We were taught in seminary that he allows it to happen. The question is why? Well, and if he's like, okay, well, if it's because it's a result of mankind being in a fallen state because of the sin of Adam, why do we have to suffer for something that he did?
Anyone who has, a shred of decency and a shred of conscience, would have to admit that we have sinned personally more than enough, to create enough problems for ourselves without having to mention Adam whatsoever at all, Unfortunately, Adam was the first person, who succumbed to sin, and he couldn't last without it. But we have outstripped him. We have outdone him on so many counts. And even those of us who, were raised right and consider ourselves pious, we sin on a daily basis. That's something. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that sometimes we are not aware of the fact that certain suffering will actually bring, a blessing as a result. And while when we look at cancer or other illnesses, we say, well, why is this happening? Why is this happening? But again, if you used sports as an illustration, if you go to the gym and you do nothing, you will absolutely, not improve your physical state. In order for your muscles to grow, you actually have to lift heavy things. You have to cause yourself a certain amount of pain. What is it they say? No pain, no gain. So really and truly, sometimes we are allowed to suffer things in life which are outside of our control. There are circumstantial things that happen, and sometimes terrible things happen to good people. They will be recompensed by God for that, in the life to come. And in many cases, even in this life as well. We just have a very narrow view. We're only looking at it when it's happening. We're not, looking at the results afterwards.
We can't see tomorrow.
Exactly,
On behalf of the youth question, statistically, every single generation has the three following things in common. An alarmingly decreasing rate of church attendance across all denominations, not just Orthodox. I couldn't find any statistical data on Orthodox Christians, unfortunately, just in the broad spectrum of Christianity. Lesser attending each generation. We're at the all-time lows right now. Lesser saying prayers together at meals or just eating together. And an all-time epidemic of loneliness. The big word here, loneliness, is rampant. It says 39% of Gen Zers and more than 1/3 of millennials report that they felt lonely at least once a week during their childhoods. That's a terrible thing. Gen Xers only reported 29% feeling that way, and baby boomers only 17% said that. Why do you think that is? I mean, if we're becoming more and more aware, especially in the realm of the internet, that our fathers and mothers, could be better, and we try to be,
I think it probably has to do to a large extent with an overall degradation of society. I would not have felt very lonely as a person who grew up in, sort of late 70s, early 80s as a child, because my friends and I, we spent all our time out on the street. But the society was safe enough. Our parents felt safe enough to allow us to spend time together unsupervised, on the streets. in the Soviet city, playing around on our bicycles or doing other things or going to the park. In the wintertime, we would go and, sled on boards down the hill or something like that. But then with every generation, the society becomes more and more corrupt to the point where parents are not comfortable leaving their children to play alone in the park. My children already grew up in the United States and Canada, and they always played supervised, not until they reached almost early 20s, or in like late teens that, they would be allowed to do something with their friends on their own. But even then, we still wanted to have a fairly reasonable idea of what's happening because we're concerned. Hence, I think children that are not able to spend time with their contemporaries, with their friends and so on, of course are going to feel more lonely because the parents aren't able to be there all the time for them. They have to work. Thus, the children are left to their own devices. And I think it brings us back to what we started with. It's all me, because the person who has been lonely is obviously going to be, inclined to say, okay, what am I going to get out of this? What that person isn't thinking of a group, of a society, what are we going to get out of it? It's more like, what am I going to get out of it?
Yeah.
Because there's even less of the we experience. Like I grew up in the community of my fellow friends and their parents, and either one of the parents can come out and say, hey, you must behave, and so on and so forth. By the time my children grew up, they didn't know that kind of a community of friends.
Well, as you said, everyone is sort of left to their own devices. Friend groups are shrinking.
Yes.
But I want to talk about the actual devices as well. So I do believe that in the same article, AmericanSurveyCenter.org, it was mentioned that, in a political context, young individuals who identified as politically liberal were by far attending church less than those who identified as conservative. Both groups are decreasing. They're heading down, which isn't good. But the liberals are far lower, which is an interesting thing because when they use arguments like, well, the church doesn't do this or this right, you can find, it's not a good choice, obviously, to find a church that's adapted itself to modern society and thinks the modern way.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit, and let us confess our faith today in the words of the Sparkle Creed. I believe in the non-binary God, whose pronouns are plural. I believe in the rainbow spirit, who shatters our image of one white light and refracts it into a rainbow of gorgeous diversity.
But, just logically speaking, they could be in a church like that identifies as Christian, but they're still not doing that. Even though, all their passions, all their sins could be excused, accepted, they could get a blessing and do whatever they want. They're still not showing up. It's this aversion of social gatherings. I also read today that a very, very, very overwhelming majority of young individuals, Gen Zers, report, I think, gathering for like social functions, events, not like parties, like actual community-oriented social events. You can, basically a euphemism for a church service here, but it could be anything, a soup kitchen, some kind of fundraiser, less than twice a year. You see it all the time at Easter, or we just had Nativity. We have the Christers, Christmas Orthodox. So Christmas, Easter Christians, we call them Christers. If you only had 30 seconds to speak to someone who shows up to services like that, just twice a year for the sake of, observing the culture or whatever, just doing the right thing, what would you tell such a person? Sorry, I kind of just launched the...
30 seconds for an individual like that? Wow. I'm...
Well, if you had a minute or two, let's say you pull them aside and you say, I haven't seen you in forever. Like, how do you get them in? What do you tell them?
I think you just welcome them and tell them that you're happy to see them, and, that they're welcome. And this is somewhere that they can, find solace, and then they should come again. Probably that's going to be it. I think one thing that we didn't touch upon, but which sort of begs attention, and that is sometimes we operate on somewhat of a naive expectation that if you present a fact to the person is going to, sort of acquiesce to the fact that you have presented. Well, what we see in actual life is that people form their opinions, they form their prejudices, they form their, ideological views, and then it doesn't really matter what facts you present before them unless they align with what they have already accepted. They're not going to respond, in any way. So in that sense, I think within this 30 seconds, any kind of connection, whether it be through a compassionate word, a word of encouragement, a word of kindness, if you can have any kind of connection with this individual, so for that person to actually say, okay, this is an okay person, this priest is okay, maybe I'll listen to him again.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you sow that seed, because really and truly, if you come across the wrong way, you more or less guarantee that it's a shut-off situation where that person won't even listen, they won't even hear anything
They're
from you.
They're going to flee, yeah.
Like even if you're standing there and working miracles and every word out of your mouth comes out as a white bird or whatever, they're going to say, this is fake, or this is some kind of trick or whatever. Turn around and walk away.
I think that the silver lining at these sort of big services where you have a bunch of people that aren't going to come again, that show up, is that they're still showing up, which means that there's something in them that told them that at least twice a year it would be the right thing to show up and stand. I actually spoke to a young man the other day. He came to the nativity service. He said, I haven't seen you in forever. He's like, yeah, I only come twice a year. And I'm like, well, are you doing all right? Is life okay? He's like, no, not really. I'm just kind of trying to tough it out. And I was like, you don't have to do this alone. And he paused, and thank the Lord, he actually thought about it. He's like, yeah, I wish I didn't have to. And I'm like, well, why don't you show up more often? He's like, I don't know. Like some of these people, they're not like, oh, I hate God. They're just, they really haven't even thought about it. They haven't processed
Well, you see,
that.
I think that, it is a fairly well-established fact that it's a lot easier to manipulate individuals than groups of people, and especially the more individuals are divided. If the person is sitting at home alone, looking into a screen, be it a phone screen or a tablet or a TV screen or computer screen, and from the other side, there's a statement being made like, well, everybody's doing this or everybody thinks this. For this person who has no one to reach out and say, hey, are you doing this?
Yeah.
No. Whoa. What are they saying? Like, you and I are not doing this, so obviously not everybody. But if that person doesn't have an actual connection, if there's not a family member to speak to, if there's no one, then that person just kind of accepts it and says, yeah,
Accepts
okay,
her fate,
sure.
right.
Like they say it's so, so it must be so. And I think a lot of these people, they hear this. Nobody goes to church. Religion is outdated. You don't need it. So naturally they think, well, I guess I'm going to look really weird if I show up. And so I think in our case, for example, what has really worked so well for some of our youth is them being able to come to church, meet each other at the church, and actually say, hey, there's somebody here I can connect to. There's somebody here I can talk to about things other than religion, just my likes or my hobbies or whatever. And, then there's that community and so on. So they begin to build an immunity to, this influence that, oh, everybody's this way or everybody's that way, because they're like, well, my friends and I were a little different.
Right.
But you have to have this my friends and I kind of thing. If you think about it, and maybe perhaps we should appeal to the North American youth, in a very kind of a bizarre way, a lot of what is popular on TV are still team sports, like American football, baseball, basketball. And people are, they are all gung-ho. They support, they support their teams and everything. So maybe if they can consider, the church is another team, like it's a wonderful team to be a part of that can actually help you, that'll support you, that'll give you the impetus, to stay the course.
And while we're not like of the world, we don't shun every aspect of it, right?
Well, of course not.
You can drink Coke and tea. We're not Mormons,
Exactly.
You have caffeine. You watch a sports game. Go to a concert if you want to. I mean, if it's a Travis Scott I don't want to get canceled. Okay.
Okay.
No, I'll say it. If it's Travis Scott concert, don't go to that. unless you want to get like sacrificed, or something where it's crazy stuff going on. But we're normal people, right? We went to public schools. We wear Nikes. We dress like normal human beings.
Our children, they grew up as part of this society.
And if you go to church, you're not going to become some like nut.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, you were talking about how people are kind of looking left and right, and they're like, okay, well, what is the person next to me doing? In a digital landscape, that was already a dangerous thing because our algorithms everywhere are on a daily basis adjusting us. We think that they're
not
adjusting
even on
to
daily.
us.
I would say on hourly basis.
We were under the impression for the past 10 years that the feed learns what you like and feeds it to you and gives it to you. But that's no longer the case. I just read today that Meta, which is responsible for Facebook and Instagram, are going to be introducing AI profiles. So people that look real, post seemingly real photos, generate seemingly real content that's indistinguishable from real people, but they're not, will be commenting, providing input, and basically will be skewing the algorithms everywhere into different directions. They will be producing content that isn't even reflective of how people feel, which is a huge risk. Because if you already thought that you were sort of in line with how society thought, now you're going to be in line with what digital programs are thinking. Well, it's not even like a real human thought anymore.
I think we have to be aware of the fact that as our society develops, as new technology emerges, people who are less scrupulous, about using these things in order to wield real power, to wield influence for their own financial gain or political gain, are going to do that. That, we have to be aware of that. Now, as a responsible Orthodox Christian, I would say we must be aware of that, but we shouldn't panic. We shouldn't, scream, lose our minds or whatever. Everybody can make his own choice as long as it's an educated choice.
Absolutely.
And hopefully a well-balanced choice and maybe measured against some true life experience. Hopefully, with some of the Holy Fathers and the saints who have proven themselves to be true Christians, throughout all different times. They lived through persecution and they lived through prosperity and illness and health and left us their heritage also to sort of, help us as part of the team, that we have some sort of a guidance.
Yeah.
What to do with ourselves and with our lives.
I agree. We just passed the 30-minute mark. So are you...
I'm okay.
Do you have a few more minutes in you?
We sure.
I just wanted to offer my closing remark, and then I'll have you give your closing remark.
Absolutely, yeah.
So my closing remark would be that, you can continue toughing this out alone. You might make it. You probably will. You might not be happy, but if you pride yourself so much on your ability to reason and think analytically and find the right decision in life, I encourage you to ask yourself why it's so difficult to step into an Orthodox church. I'm not talking about the Westboro Baptist Church. I'm not talking about the Mormons. Most Christians don't even acknowledge them as Christians, right? I'm talking about step into an Orthodox church. Don't step into some new Baptist church on the street. Find a church that was created by Christ himself and walk in. And if you don't want to walk in, ask yourself why. There's a good Christian author, a writer, who said, every man or woman that believes that God is not real has a very good reason, an excuse, a motivating factor for holding on to that belief like this, and they won't part with it, right? If you want to talk to a Christian about, well, do you ever doubt your faith? And, do you ever think God isn't real sometimes? Or do you ever have, they'll be like, yeah, of course. I even saints, famous saints have wrestled with that question, right? But if you are firm in your understanding that God isn't real, there is no higher power. Once we're dead, we're dead. We were created for nothing, basically. Enjoy the life we have now. Ask yourself, why are you so dependent on that reasoning? And if you are, can you just once, a little challenge, can you step out of that comfort zone and try stepping into an Orthodox church? You don't have to say hi to anyone. You can, but just look around and just embrace that feeling, even for 10, 15 minutes. you'll find out that there is a community at every single church that is there to help you, there to love you. So from a purely secular standpoint, non-spiritual, you already have that benefit. Prayers are not what dolls are to children. There's something special there. So I encourage you to just step in and think. And if you can't, to once again, sit on your phone and just think about, why are you so opposed to this? Because we hate certain groups of people? That's not the case. You're thinking of other Christian churches. Step into an Orthodox church. As Christ said, come and see.
Well, in closing, I would only, maybe offer this thought. Everyone nowadays relies upon the internet in order to accomplish certain tasks. When something breaks at home, sometimes the first thing we do is we go on YouTube and we look how to fix it. And then in some cases, of course, we actually have to call a professional to come and fix it. And so I would say, well, we are ready to admit that we alone do not possess the knowledge necessary to maintain everything within our life. We can't fix our own cars, we can't fix our own refrigerators, we can't fix our own plumbing and so on. And most definitely, if anyone gets a serious diagnosis, a serious illness, he will definitely run to the hospital and make sure to use the most educated doctors. Why is it then that when it comes to our spiritual life and to our eternal fate, we are so obstinate and think that we don't need anyone, we don't need to listen to any of the experts, we should just decide on our own? It would be incredibly foolish. I remember when I first came to the United States, one of my seminary classmates laughed and said, the saying is, if you're your own lawyer, you have an idiot for a lawyer. And if you think about it, should you be your own priest? Should you be your own savior? That's actually a really scary and dangerous idea. So many people are out there already on medication against depression because they can't handle the pressure of life. And to push away God, who is willing and able to push away his church, which is there and ready and available to help, seems, in my mind, to be counterintuitive and not very smart.
Thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
Father Viatcheslav does run a channel of his own. I will provide the name. Could you say it?
It's just Protopriest Viatcheslav Davidenko on YouTube.
And you're available on social media as well. If anyone wishes to reach out, they have a blessing too?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay,
All right, thank
that
you, Father.
works.
I mean,
God bless. Thanks.
And blessed nativity с Рождеством Христовым.
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Likewise.
Wait, if you like this show, that means the world to me. Glory to God. I love making episodes. I want to make even more at a faster rate and expand the show. I can't do this without your support though. Each episode takes many, many hours to make. If you want to help me, feel free to send over $1. I need $1. Or purchase a non-alcoholic beverage for me such as coffee, tea, or pomegranate juice. PayPal.me/Andrei Slivin. Thank you, and God bless you.